yayo impore rwiza iho komera
Jominitani irashize twibuka abazize Genocide twabuze abana ababyeyi abavandimwe
tubura n'inshuti bose bazira uko bavutse batulekede enaku n'obulumi Neba na mwandu Katonda abawe emirembe mubujuvu
No Never again
Shagutongana nanitsangano Turi bene mugabo umwe
Abanyarwanda turashima dore ubu hashize imyaka itari mikeya n'urugendo rurerure rutari rworoshye ariko dushyira hamwe igihugu cyanjye ntituzibagirwa bya bihe by'icuraburindi twanyuzemo ubu nicyo gihe ngo dushyire hamwe tube mu mahoro dusenyera umugozi umwe mu rugamba rw'iterambere ibyo byose tuzabigeraho turi kumwe n'ukwibuka twiyubaka bityo n'amahanga hazatwigiraho
Y'amajoro y'amaraso amanywa yuje imiborogo Rwanda impore ntibizongera ubu dushyize hamwe twese turi umuntu umwe intego ni imwe ukwiyubakira urwatubyaye Rwanda rwacu ntuzigera uzimira
twigire ku mateka twigire ku byahise
twiyubakire igihugu twibanire mu mahoro nta gutongana nta n'inzangano turi bene mugabo umwe twibanire mu mahoro amahoro amahoro
twibanire mu mahoro twibanire mu mahoro twiyubaka and I believe we can make it ubumwe urukundo umurava biba ari byo bituranga imyaka ibaye myinshi kongeye kubona izuba mana igihe n'iki twari mu icuraburindi ntawizeraga yuko tuzongera kubona umucyo none ubu turamwenyura icyizere ni cyose n'amarira ukundi nta miboro ukundi ntibizongera kuba never again twigire ku mateka twigire ku byahise
twiyubakire igihugu twibanire mu mahoro nta gutongana nta n'inzangano turi bene mugabo umwe twibanire mu mahoro amahoro amahoro
twibanire mu mahoro twibanire mu mahoro twibanire mu mahoro
wanze kwira, twibuka ijoro ryanze gutana, ijosi ryibasiwe bitavugwa, igihugu cyuzuye imiborogo, ubwoko bwahindutse icyaha, twibuke byabe bitavugika, umuntu arengwa n'ibyo areba,
Yes, and our guest of honor is already here, and some of our key guests. So our program will officially start in 20 minutes, and so I will come back and introduce our program. So I just wanted to welcome you to Makerere University and to this very important event. Thank you very much.
kandi izabagororera inzozi nziza umuseke ukibamo ubunyoni ijuru ry'iwacu hose nta bicu imana z'i Rwanda nazo zasetse amahoro mpereza iwacu amahoro mpereza iwacu gihanga yatanze ituze inkotanyi bazishubije mu rwubati ingabo zose zikutse ingamba ingoma nyinshi numva zinigira amahoro mpereza iwacu amahoro mpereza iwacu narose ijoro ry'imihigo ryakoranije intwari kambere bataramye abasore beza bakebye inkondo aho bacuranze umurya bawukaze amahoro mpereza iwacu amahoro mpereza iwacu imirindi y'intore ibyivugo by'urufayi ikondera ritsikimba urusobe rw'ibisigwa n'amahamba icyo gitaramo cyahuruje amahanga amahoro mpereza iwacu amahoro
cumi n'itanu irashize twibuka abazize jenoside twabuze abana ababyeyi abavandimwe
tubura n'inshuti bose bazira uko bavutse batulekede enaku n'obulumi bamulekwa ne banamwandu katonda abawe emirembe mu bujuvu
twarakanzwe n'ubwicanyi twakiriwe ikiremwa muntu tuzogwanya ikintu cyose cyiyonyabwoko egome no kwiyamiriza imigambi ya jenoside mbega bishwe bose boba bazize iki harageze ko abantu bareka agatima k'ubunyamaswa
never 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 again let us keep alive the memory of genocide never 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 again genocide against humanity never 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 again
never again tunakataa wanaosema mauaji hayakuwepo na hayatarudi kuwepo tena. Never again will we agree. No, 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 no. Sisi vijana kamwe hatutaki mauaji ya kimbari. Abarokotse nimuhumure hari impamvu mwasigaye
gucika kw'icumu nikemeza ko mugomba kubaho
abacu bagiye heza bicaye ijabiro kwa jambo
tuzahora tubibuka tuzahora turwanya ikibi tuzaririmba tuti never never again
abana bacu bazatsinda ikibi bitwaje neza ho
never again let us keep alive the memory of genocide
never again.
Itariki 12 z'ukwezi kwa kane 1994 imukarange habereye isibaniro abantu barapfa bacuzwa impinja zikubitwa ku bikuta iryo ni ishyano ryabuze
baje baturutse Nyawera turabibuka baje baverukara turibuka baje bavuye i Gahini i Karubamba hacore Miboro.
Itariki 12 z'ukwezi kwa kane 1994 imukarange habereye isibaniro abantu barapfa bacuzwa impinja zikubitwa ku bikuta iryo ni ishyano ryabuze gihanura.
Reka twibuke imiryango yasimiriye hano iwacu mu Karange. Ndibuka data wambyaye Sebugwiza Yanasi na mukuru we Sebakari bo kwa Rwabugimba. Ikivi mwasize mutangije tuzacyusa. Ndibuka Kabagema, Gafaranga, Hodari na Sebugwiza Tarisisi. Abo bose baguye mu biro bya Kabagema. Ndibuka Paul mu Bigambwa n'umuhungu we Matata na Seminega. Ndibuka Kantarama Daforoza n'abana be Karayiga Dejeni na Didasiana. Reka twibuke abo mu muryango wa kwa Nkuryo Gasinzigwa n'umufasha we Bazubagira Yudita. Ndibuka Kayitare n'umufasha we Gatarina. Ndibuka n'abandi benshi baguye Kinyemera, Karambarara n'Inyagatovu. Turabibuka abantu baguye Kitazigurwa. Turibuka abantu baguye Miragwe. Turabibuka baguye Midebo. Kutabibuka byaba gucumura.
Itariki 12 z'ukwezi kwa kane 1994 imukarange habereye isibaniro abantu barapfa bacuzwa impinja zikubitwa ku bikuta iryo ni ishyano ryabuze
Ndibuka umuryango wa Nyabutsitsi. Ndibuka na Hitimana Pierre n'umuryango we. Natwe abo dusangiye umusare twirinde kuba intati. Kuko kuba intati ni nko gutema ishami ry'igiti uryicayeho. Ndibuka abakongoro Mwiragwe bose. Ndibuka abasana bose. Ndibuka abatara bose. Ndibuka n'abandi bose baguye Kinyemera, Karambarara no ku Kabuye. Ndibuka Musuhuke n'umuhungu we Semugeshi. Ndibuka Mapiti, Kabagwira, Garatsiya n'abana ba Yani n'umugore we. Ndibuka na Kananga waguye Gahushyi. Ndibuka na Saveri Rutayisire waguye mu Gitega. Bose uko bavuzwe haruguru, bose baje bagana mu Karange, bazi ko bakira bacurwa inkumbi hacore Miboro. Ntituzahwema kubibuka.
itariki 12 z'ukwezi kwa kane 1994 imukarange habereye isibaniro abantu barapfa bacuzwa impinja zikubitwa ku bikuta iryo ni ishyano ryabuze gihanura itariki 12 z'ukwezi kwa kane 1994 imukarange habereye isibaniro abantu barapfa bacuzwa impinja zikubitwa ku bikuta iryo ni ishyano ryabuze gihanura.
Hello, good afternoon once again, and welcome to this very important event hosted at Makerere University. My name is Awel Uwihanganye. I serve as the Head of Advancement at Makerere University in the Office of the Vice Chancellor. And I'm privileged to be your MC this afternoon. As you know, we are all gathered here to commemorate the 30th anniversary of a very tragic event that happened 30 years ago, and that's the genocide against the Tutsi that happened in Rwanda in 1994. And we have a fantastic keynote speaker who is going to take us through the insights on the theme for this event, which is preservation, memorization, and resilience. And it's so important that we have so many young people in the audience who are the future and who are the ones who mostly will benefit from the conversation that we're going to have today. Excellency Rutabana, the High Commissioner, Republic of Rwanda, guest of honor, Ms. Philip Ruchekere, Ambassador Philip, I have to get used to call you Ambassador. Yeah. Ambassador Philip Ruchekere from the Regional Security and Peace Program at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and all excellencies, distinguished guests, Vice Chancellor, represented by the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dr. Umar Kakumba, and all ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. So we'll start our program by inviting the students from the School of Performing Arts at Makerere University, who are going to perform the national anthems, and that would officially start our program, and then I'll take you through to the next items on the program. Thank you very much. May I ask you rise for the national anthems, please? Thank you very much. You may have to take your seats. Thank you very much, Sue, for holding us. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to this very important event. This public lecture, organized by the Rwandan High Commission in partnership with Makerere University, is one of the many activities the High Commission and the government of Rwanda is having around the world to commemorate this anniversary of very unfortunate events that happened many years ago. And primarily, I was asked to lead this conversation as an MC, and very honored, Your Excellency, that you asked me to do that. But primarily to really contribute to this conversation about how to we make sure that this kind of tragic events never happen again, how to fight genocide denial, those who deny these sort of events that happen, and making sure hate speech does not take root in society where conflict happens. And for this discussion, we have a very detailed program which was shared to you when you were invited. It includes having a distinguished speaker, Dr. Wandia Njoa from Desta University, who's going to be our keynote speaker. You're welcome, Dr. Wandia. I was very happy to make your acquaintance earlier. And then, of course, we'll have a distinguished panel, which will be chaired by Dr. Zahra Nampeo from the School of Law at Makerere University. And it's on this note that, on behalf of the Ambassador Tawana, to share our condolences with Dr. Susie Muwanga, who was meant to moderate this conversation, but unfortunately she lost her mother just yesterday, and so we send her our condolences. So on this note, I'd like to take the pleasure to invite the Acting Vice Chancellor, Dr. Umar Kakumba, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic Affairs at Makerere University, to welcome us all to Makerere University. Thank you.
Many thanks to you, Ewell. Your Excellencies, allow me to recognize Your Excellency, the High Commissioner, Republic of Rwanda, Joseph Rutavana, Your Excellency, Ambassador Philip Matthew Ruchikere, distinguished guests, the Honorable Ministers here, members of Makerere University Council on Management, the keynote speaker, Dr. Wandia Njoya, our panelists this afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to welcome you to Makerere University this afternoon. I want to convey to you warm regards and greetings from the Vice Chancellor, Professor Barnabas Nawangwe, and the members of management. Yeah, this afternoon is part of the series that commemorate the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, and would want to thank the organizers for choosing Makerere University to host this very, very significant event. And in so doing, It gives the opportunity to expose the academia, our students, staff and other stakeholder community, the academic discourse, and in line with the efforts that have been made ever since then to try and recover from the unfortunate incidences. But it also presents an opportunity, this public lecture, for us to engage quite more in the discourse in line with fighting the ideologies that relate to genocide, but also to appreciate the efforts that have so far been entrenched and progressively to promoting a harmonious society in our communities, in our countries. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the story of Rwanda since the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi is one of resilience and determination. It is one founded on the ethos that one does not recover by ignoring the uncomfortable truths, but by confronting them and resolving never to let past mistakes reoccur. At the heart of this resolve is the realization that retribution can never bring about a cessation of violence. It only serves to perpetuate it. Renowned global icon and father of the Rainbow Nation, His Excellency Nelson Mandela, at his inauguration speech as the President of the Republic of South Africa on 10th May 1994 said, and I quote, "Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud." End of quote. And whereas after 27 years of humiliation, isolation, and torture at the hands of apartheid regime, Nelson Mandela was more than justified as the new head of state to choose the path of retribution. He instead, I'll say this again, and whereas after 27 years of humiliation, isolation, and torture at the hands of the apartheid regime, Nelson Mandela was more than justified as the new head of state to choose the path of retribution. He instead chose not to choose the path of retribution. He instead chose the path of reconciliation. It is therefore no wonder that when Rwanda patriotic forces finally secured the nation in 1994 and began rebuilding South Africa, a nation fresh on path of reconciliation was quick to come to Rwanda's aid. This is best illustrated by the words of His Excellency President Paul Kagame at the 30th commemoration of the genocide against Tutsi on 7th April 2024 recently. His Excellency said, and I quote, "The new South Africa paid for Cuban doctors to help rebuild our shattered health system and opened up its universities to Rwandan citizens and students to pay the local fees to access education. Among the hundreds of students who benefited from South Africa's generosity, some were orphaned survivors, others were the children of perpetrators, and many were neither." So here lies the key lesson for all of us gathered here and those that are witnessing this event across the region and the world, that whereas the perpetrators of hate speech may be few, if we do not stand up and rebuke or arrest them, they can wreak a lot of havoc. Although the genocide against the Tutsis lasted from April to July 1994, 30 years down the road, we are still rebuilding what was destroyed by the perpetrators. So this public lecture is therefore timely, especially in the area of increased proliferation of social media and smartphones in our societies. It is timely reminder that the damage caused by reckless spread of misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech is extremely dangerous, and if not countered, can really take generations to recover from it. Hate that portrays itself especially in the forms of tribalism, segregation, derogatory talk has far-reaching consequences and effects even beyond the borders of a community or a country where it is encouraged. Whereas Golo in Mpigi district is geographically over 400 kilometers from Rwanda, it is home to mass graves of thousands of victims of the genocide against the Tutsi, who were cast into the tributaries of Lake Victoria. The fishermen and members of the community who helped retrieve and accord these victims a decent burial have never been the same. So I therefore pray that our audience today, this afternoon, especially the young generation, will view this public lecture as an opportunity to accurately learn from the past, so as to take proper actions for the future. Furthermore, I pray that it will serve as a turning point for those who have previously engaged in genocide, denial, so as to promote healing, unity, and collective memory for the survivors and their respective families. Once again, I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to Makerere University, and I wish you fruitful deliberations as we build for the future. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much for that fantastic speech, Dr. Kakumba. And again, the emphasis on the importance of having young people who are here, who are the ones who really will make sure that the thought process and incidents like genocide never happen again. So you are the main beneficiaries for all the knowledge and the insights that are going to be shared during this lecture. So I'll take the opportunity now to invite His Excellency Joseph Rutabana, who is the High Commissioner for the Republic of Rwanda, to make his address. Thank you.
Our chief guest, Ambassador Philip Lukikaire, representing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the government of Uganda, the Deputy Vice Chancellor Makerere University, Umar Kakumba, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps and Ambassador of Eritrea to Uganda, His Excellency Mohamed Sulaiman Ahmed, Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, and heads of international organizations. My sister, the UN Resident Coordinator, Susan Ngogi Namondo, is here. Former MPs present and distinguished guests, all protocols observed. Dear students, good afternoon. Let me start my remarks by thanking Makerere University to have accepted our request for partnership in commemorating the 30th anniversary of the genocide perpetrated against the Tutsi in Rwanda in 1994. I also thank our keynote speaker, Dr. Wandia, and members of this panel who accepted to be part of this public lecture. It is one of the activities that the High Commission has prepared for this commemorative period. Our main event will take place on Saturday, the 20th of April at Golo Genocide Memorial Site in Mpigi, as the Deputy Vice Chancellor has mentioned. This year marks the 30th commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, under the theme, as we have noted, Remember, Unite, Renew. We remember so that memory is kept for future generations. we unite because unity of Rwandans is and will always be paramount. We renew because resilience, but not despair, by survivors of the genocide and the whole nation have been a key factor for renewing lives. This 30th commemoration also has a special meaning as it marks a generational cycle since the genocide was put to an end in July 1994 by the Rwandese Patriotic Front and its military wing, the Rwandese Patriotic Army, RPA, which was led by our current president, His Excellency Paul Kagame. And it is an opportune time for a call to reflect on the transformational journey that Rwanda has undergone for the last 30 years, building on the legacy of strength, resilience, and unity that the new generation is called upon to sustain and carry forward to adapt to today's global challenges and future aspirations. As we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the genocide against the Tutsi, we also celebrate 30 years of unity and resilience and a whole new generation of Rwandans aspiring for a future free of hatred and built on the principles of shared identity. Ndi Umunyarwanda, meaning I'm a Rwandan, and committed to fight and prevent the resurgence of any forms of hatred and divisive politics. Despite major achievements and milestones in rebuilding Rwanda, among which unity and reconciliation, security, good governance, and welfare of survivors, there is still an increase of manifestations of denial and distortion of the planning and execution of this genocide against the Tutsi, which costed the lives of more than 1 million people between April and July 1994. Therefore, education about the genocide is one of the most important ways to keep the memory of the victims alive. It is important to reflect on the root causes and consequences of the genocide so that not only Rwandans, but the world at large take the necessary measures to punish the crime of genocide and prevent it from happening again. The objective behind denial of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi is to assert that the genocide did not occur. This denial rejects the researched and proven facts that Tutsis were the victims of the genocide between April 7th and July 15th, 1994. With contempt for factual evidence, the perpetrators have tried to alter the story, diminishing the death toll, claiming the killings were a self-defense, and blaming the victims instead. The above is coupled by use of interpretative genocide denial, a mutational form of denial that occurs after factual proof from historical records and testimonies have been established and proven beyond doubt. It means that the massacres and killings are acknowledged as something other than the genocide. The survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi have tried to prevail over unparalleled upheavals and have showed unbelievable resilience. They deserve justice and respect. The commemoration of the genocide is a global framework to honor the victims, comfort survivors, and pay tribute to Rwandans who stopped the genocide and liberated the country. It provides an opportunity for the Rwandans and global community to stand together and draw lessons from Rwanda's tragic history with the goal of fighting genocide ideology, hate speeches, and preventing future genocides around the world. This public lecture will therefore help us to move in the same direction by reflecting to the 30 years journey that Rwanda and its people have taken following the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. It will also allow us to understand the dangers of denialism and the need of guaranteeing never again for future generations. So I wish you all, especially our young students present here, a good and productive exchange of ideas aimed at learning lessons from what happened in Rwanda 30 years ago. May God bless you.
Thank you, Ambassador Rutabana, for that very insightful speech into the history and the current state of affairs in Rwanda. Thank you very much. I now take the pleasure to invite our guest of honor, representing the government of Uganda and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Philip Ruchikaire.
Thank you very much, Awel and Leo Africa Institute. I know you're doing a lot of very good work, including this event. Thank you, Ambassador Rutabana, for your wonderful presentation. Thank you, Dr. Umar Kakumba, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Makerere University. Thank you for hosting us at this important event. It's an honor to be in the presence of so many distinguished, important members of our community, especially the Rwandan community, the diplomatic community. I bring greetings from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from the leadership of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They hold this event in very high esteem, and it's an honor to be here. My name is Philip Ruchikaire, and I am here representing Regional Peace and Security, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Your Excellency, Colonel Joseph Rutabana, High Commissioner of the Republic of Rwanda, Dr. Umar Kakumba, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Makerere University, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, distinguished speakers, and participants, the Rwanda community, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the people and the Republic of Uganda, I join the government and the people of the Republic of Rwanda on this occasion as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Kwibuka 30 with the theme, Remember, Unite, Renew. The late Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, and I quote, Africans believe in something that is difficult to render in English. We call it Ubuntu. It means the essence of being human. It embraces compassion and toughness. It recognizes that my humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, just 30 years ago, unimaginable human tragedy was unfolding in Rwanda. Over 100 days, more than 1 million people were systematically murdered because of their ethnicity. Unspeakable acts of brutality and inhumanity were carried out. Today, we honor their memory. We are aware that the agony of those harrowing days looms large for many in Rwanda because of the horrors endured over 100 days as towns and villages became killing fields, when many fled their homes and hid only to be found and forced to flee again. Rwanda lived through one of the worst episodes of violence in the late 20th century, which left deep and lasting scars on those who survived. This significant event is a call to Ugandans and Africans at large to reaffirm their unwavering support to the prevention and fight against genocide to ensure that it never happens again. Dear colleagues and all here present, remembering the genocide invokes a profound sense of duty among nations to uphold peace and unity. Remembering the violent history of our own and other countries concerns us all in the present and for the future, so we learn not to repeat the mistakes and crimes from the past, and so that genocide never happens again. Remembering the victims of such atrocity reconnects us to our humanness and at the same time teaches us about the failure of humanity because of indifference and apathy. Remembering genocide is relevant today because globally we see a steady rise in hate crime motivated by discrimination and bigotry. This is precisely why we need to wake up now and bring back empathy for the suffering others near and far through remembering. In 2023, UNESCO's World Heritage Committee added 4 genocide memorial sites in Rwanda to the list of World Heritage Sites. And after the 15th anniversary of the genocide, 3 memorial sites were created in Uganda, at Lambu, Kasensero, and Golo. Listing a memorial site will enable the entire world to learn more about and draw lessons from the history of the genocide, which Rwanda shares with the whole international community. Ladies and gentlemen, we also recognize the survivors' resilience and willingness to forgive. As we mark the 30th commemoration of the genocide, we reflect on the importance of unity and reconciliation in building a peaceful and prosperous society. We recognize the crucial role of reconciliation in ensuring sustainable peace, stability, and development. Processes of social healing, truth-telling, repentance, and forgiveness have been used to prepare for social reintegration of convicted genocide perpetrators upon their release. These processes have gone some way towards freeing both the perpetrators as well as the victims and their families from the bondage of shame, unforgiveness, hatred, revenge, and genocide ideology, helping to build a unified Rwanda. Rwanda serves as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of forgiveness. We are reminded that we need to find each other and build a world where love and compassion triumph over hate. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to express concern over the emergence of divisive ideologies in the region and globally, with some propagating hate and inciting violence against ethnic groups. Hate speech and distortion of facts about genocide incite violence and have a devastating effect on communities. And the scale and impact of hate speech and disinformation are nowadays amplified by new technologies and social media. Genocide happens when humanity's moral compass fails. Hateful ideologies proliferate, and state-sanctioned dehumanization of an entire group is allowed to spread. In order to secure a future with peace, unity, and dignity, we must firmly speak out about all forms of racism and discrimination, addressing the root causes of conflict and violence, and taking swift action to prevent them. The remembrance of this day should be used as a moment of deep reflection and opportunity to adapt strategies to counter bigotry and hate speech. I wish to recognize the importance of legal frameworks that criminalize genocide ideology, including the 1948 UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. In addition, I reaffirm that education and communities should be that education of communities should be carried out by academia, incorporating knowledge of the dangers of ethnic discrimination into academic curricula and syllabuses. This should be done taking into account the relationship between education, conflict, and peace building or nation building. This applies not only in Rwanda, but all nations across the globe, with learners encountering these historical events, thereby creating resilient communities with the capacity to understand genocide and its evils. Ladies and gentlemen, what the people of Rwanda have achieved since 1994 in their journey to unity, reconciliation, justice, and the preservation of the memory of the genocide against the Tutsi is a lesson to the rest of the world. The transformation of Rwanda in terms of governance, economic recovery, social cohesion, and development is an exceptional achievement. Rwanda's remarkable recovery serves as a powerful testament to the strength and moral courage of its people, proving that unity and shared resolve of a people can indeed reshape the destiny of a nation. Uganda will continue to stand by the people of Rwanda in its transformation journey. Uganda and Rwanda share historical and fraternal bonds of friendship. Our two countries share a common border and common heritage. Uganda and Rwanda are members of the same sub-regional and regional cooperative frameworks such as EAC, ICGLR, COMESA, and the AU. These are organizations that work for peace, security, stability in the region. Uganda is committed to using its membership to promote the ideals of regional integration. We value the deepening of our bilateral cooperation with Rwanda and indeed with all our neighbors. This is not only for political reasons, but it is essential for our shared prosperity. In March 2023, Rwanda hosted the 11th Joint Permanent Commission between Republic of Rwanda and Republic of Uganda. The meeting assessed strategic areas of cooperation between the two countries, and 4 memoranda of understanding were signed in the fields of justice, constitutionalism, mutual legal assistance, diplomatic and political consultations, and migration matters. We look forward to many more engagements of this nature. Your Excellency, allow me, on behalf of the government and the people of Uganda, to wish good health to the President of the Republic of Rwanda, His Excellency Paul Kagame. May the government and the people of Rwanda enjoy peace and prosperity, and may friendship and solidarity between Uganda and Rwanda flourish. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Philip Ruchekire, for that great speech on behalf of the Republic of Uganda. And so I have the pleasure now to invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Wendy Anjoa. Wendy Anjoa is an associate professor of literature at Desta University in Kenya. And since graduating with a PhD in French and Francophone studies, Dr. Anjoa has published book chapters and presented conference papers on genocide against the Tutsi. She's also a translator of English version of Jean-Paul Kimonyo's Rwanda's popular genocide, A Perfect Storm. And I had a glimpse of her very fantastic keynote, so I'm looking forward to listening to you, and I'd like now to invite you to deliver your paper. I'll use the opportunity as Dr. Joy is coming. If you'd like to use the washrooms, we have washrooms there and there's some downstairs. In case you need any water refreshments, we have some colleagues there. You just have to signal to them and they will come to you. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Joy.
My apologies, 1 minute. I'm so thrilled to be here. Let me start by saying that. Thank you so much to Your Excellency, the representative of the Foreign Ministry of the Republic of Rwanda. Thank you so much also, Your Excellency Joseph Rutabana, for inviting me. I also want to thank the acting Vice Chancellor of Makerere University for hosting this forum. And I want to begin by saying that this is truly an East African moment, and I'm so proud. I'm so proud to be a Kenyan, invited by a Rwandan to a university in Uganda to talk about Rwanda. This is truly an East African moment. So I'm moved also, and we talked about this when we were having lunch with the ambassador. I'm moved also because Makerere is the home of many East African scholars. I was taught by alumni of Makerere University, and we, the second generation of university students in Kenya, were taught by academics from this university. I also mentioned that I am a child of parents who were members of the East African Revival, which started in Rwanda and Uganda. And so, in a sense, I am coming home. I am coming to my intellectual and spiritual home. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So I have been asked many times by Rwandans, because I've been to Rwanda many times, how it is that a Kenyan who looks like a Rwandan, apparently, actually speaks French and knows some of Rwanda's history. So I'm going to ask you to indulge me for a few minutes while I tell you about my school years, since we are in a university, to explain how we got to this East African moment. And I'm also going to tell you about my school years, because its knowledge is a very important part of remembering what happened in 1994 in the genocide against the Tutsi, and also in our battle against genocide denial. This is a university where knowledge is our main work, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the panelists and from you, the audience. So I'm going to begin by telling my story. I studied French in a high school in Kenya in the 1980s, and I was good at it. I'm not so sure about now. And my teachers liked me, and that helped. One of my teachers was a Rwandan, but we were told she was Ugandan. I also had classmates who were Ugandan, but later on we heard that there was some connection to Rwanda. I was therefore aware of a complicated history that brought these two countries together, but I was too busy trying to master Jean-Paul Sartre's book, which was very difficult, so I didn't pay much attention. In high school, my goal was to become a lawyer because I thought that was the only profession that we were allowed. But I didn't get enough points to enter the law school. So I was admitted to take a Bachelor of Arts Education in French at Kenyatta University. And even in Kenyatta, I had a range of teachers. Some were Kenyan, others were Congolese, others were Rwandan, others were Tanzanian. By the time I graduated in 1994, which was when the genocide was starting, I had felt the call to be a teacher, and I had given up my ambitions to be in law school. I wanted to be a scholar of education, but the Kenyan universities I applied to for a Master's of Education turned me down, and I thank God they did. But Kenyatta University admitted me to study for a Master of Arts in French. Then I got a job at Daystar University, where I still am. I still had dreams of studying education, but I was told I had to pursue my doctoral studies in a subject that I had been employed to teach. So I went to the linguistic attaché of the French embassy to ask if there were any opportunities to study in France. He told me not to bother because the government's position was to support only high school teachers of French. So I applied to study French in the United States, and I was accepted. And then that began my full circle back to Rwanda. Because when the time came to write my dissertation, I wanted to study literature in French from countries closer to Kenya, namely DR Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi. But I had no one to guide me. None of the faculty in the department I was in specialized in those areas, and in most American universities at the time, the dominant countries of study were Senegal, Cameroon, and Cote d'Ivoire. So I was searching for literature from these three countries when I came across a book by Yolande Mukangasana called La mort ne veut pas de moi, which is translated as Not My Time to Die, and her second book, N'aie pas peur de savoir, which means Don't Be Afraid to Know. And I was blown away by what Mukangasana had written, and I was determined to study more about what happened in Rwanda in 1994. So in 2002, I went for a 9-month stint at the University of Strasbourg in France. My ambition was to find out more about Rwanda, and if possible, meet with Mukangasana. But I was walking blind again. In the University of Strasbourg, there were no specialists in anything African. Eventually, I located a Belgian professor who was based at the University of Metz, which was not too far from where I was, and who had published some work on Congo. So I took a train journey to Metz, met with him, and I told him I was interested in working on literature on what happened in Rwanda in 1994, and asked if he could help me with some sources or some writers. What he told me still makes me shiver to this day. He said that there was no point of studying the genocide because no one wants to talk about it, and Rwandans were not ready to talk about it. He said that I would not get anything from a Rwandan. What makes me shiver when I think back on that time is that I actually believed him. So I left Metz, having decided to find a different dissertation topic. Then I returned to the US to complete my studies. When I was there, I attended a conference of the African Literature Association, where one of the keynote speakers was Senegalese writer Boubacar Boris Diop, who had just published his novel, Murambi, Book of Bones. It was his lecture when I finally understood the political dynamics of the genocide against the Tutsi from an unapologetically African perspective. After I completed my studies, I had the opportunity to meet Professor John Paul Karegeya and Alois Mahwa, who invited me under the summer program of the Interdisciplinary Genocide Studies Center to meet with various Rwandan artists, academics, clergy, government officials, genocide survivors, and perpetrators. And on that trip, I finally got to meet Yolande Mukagasana. We even visited her home in Kigali. Why am I telling this story? I'm telling this story to illustrate how imperialism has ensured that Africans learning about each other's countries is extremely difficult. I had access to scholarly resources well out of the reach of most Africans, but my search to understand what happened in Rwanda in 1994 was consistently frustrated. And yet, one of the factors that made the genocide against the Tutsi possible was the global ignorance about Africa, especially about Rwanda, Burundi, and Congo, all areas that suffered the brutal force of Belgian colonialism. In 1994, Rwanda was barely known. If you have watched Raoul Peck's excellent film, Sometimes in April, there is an iconic moment that illustrates this ignorance when a journalist asks at a press conference, I quote, "The rebels, are they Tutu or Hutsi?" That's how ignorant the world was. It is rumored that senior government officials in Western countries had read about Rwanda only and were making decisions based on a cycling tour guide book that was written in the 1970s. In his book, Complicity with Genocide, Adam Lebor argues that the UN bureaucrats were useless in intervening in genocide, be it in Bosnia, Rwanda, or Darfur, due to ignorance of UN bureaucrats of the unique political dynamics of specific countries. They were content to lament over cocktails about ancient tribal hatreds. It took my interaction with Africans, with Boubacar Boris Diop, Jean-Paul Karegeya, and Kulsi Lamko, to finally get in touch with a politically conscious, African-centered understanding of the genocide against the Tutsi. Diop had spent his time in Rwanda under the project of Écrire par devoir de mémoire, which was organized by Lamko. For Diop, Africans beyond Rwanda are still deeply implicated in the genocide against the Tutsi for reasons that because the genocide's reasons were European. The world's inertia during the genocide was possible because of racist attitudes towards Africans. The world refused to intervene in the slaughter of 1 million Rwandans because African lives were not worth the trouble. When I returned home to Kenya, I hoped to teach a course on the genocide against the Tutsi. But unfortunately for me, my specialization was literature, and the neoliberal competition for market-friendly subjects made students hesitant to take any classes in my department in the name of avoiding courses that were not market-friendly. This neoliberal anti-arts propaganda is something with which Makerere University is familiar, as has been captured by Mahmoud Mamdani in his book, Scholars in the Marketplace. And so, despite all my scholarship and interventions on the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, I have been able to teach only one Kenyan class once in my entire academic career. And yet, the ignorance about the genocide has serious ramifications, at least where I come from in Kenya. A few months ago, a Kenyan journalist wrote a post on X, or formerly Twitter, asking why Kigali cannot sit down and talk with FDLR. A few Kenyans, myself included, reminded him that FDLR counts genocidaires among its members. I have also seen in Kenyan universities a number of theses and dissertations with elements of genocide denial that pass undetected by Kenyan academic supervisors. How is this lack of knowledge possible? To answer this question, I'll turn the spotlight now on my country, Kenya. In Kenya, it is difficult to discuss the genocide against the Tutsi for two reasons. One is that for many Kenyans, the rubric through which we understand the genocide against the Tutsis is the 2007-2008 post-election violence in Kenya. We assume that Tutsi and Hutu are two distinct groups with different languages, and that the Tutsi are like the Kikuyu. So just as post-election violence ended with the agreement between two principals, Raila Odinga and Mwai Kibaki in 2008, we reason, like the Kenyan journalist, that RPF and FDLR are engaged in a similar conflict. The second blind spot comes from Kenya's dedication to the European principles of liberalism. The instinct of European liberalism is to automatically distrust all African leaders and to insist on regular elections and term limits as the solution to all problems. On that basis, without any knowledge of history, the politician Victoire Ingambire's message resonates with Kenyan liberals. She appears as a vocal human rights critic against dictatorship, who is fighting for freedom of speech and rule of law. Trying to contextualize the problem with what she's saying through referring to the genocide against the Tutsi is casually dismissed with the statement, "The genocide is no excuse." This is a serious problem which, I must admit, has made me reduce my public discussion of the genocide against the Tutsi. One, I have limited resources to consistently study the genocide and the ensuing ripple effect on the region. With the neoliberal onslaught on African higher education, we have resorted to relying on Western donors to fund our research, and no Western donor will give us funds to study African countries other than our own. As I have already shown you through my story, there is an intellectual infrastructure in Africa that blocks us from understanding one another through direct conversations between Africans themselves, like this one we are having today. Second, Western liberalism and its extensive PR and media machinery have ensured that immediately Congo or Rwanda comes up in a conversation, one is goaded to explain the Paul Kagame presidency and the problems in Congo. As I said, any mention of the genocide as the roots of these problems is casually dismissed as an excuse. Mentioning imperialist interests in the region and the colonial roots of the problems is talked of as blaming the colonialists. This kind of dismissal points to the inherent character of liberal discourse. Liberal discourse is frustratingly linear, narrow-minded, individualist, obsessed with morality, and hostile to complexity. And so the lives of millions of people disappear from the conversation. Immediately the name of one political leader is mentioned. Liberalism pretends to offer robust debate, but in reality, it offers us a simplistic view of politics where discussion is only between the dominant side and the ceremonial opposition. This simplistic liberal formula of politics is, in my view, the greatest driver of denial of the genocide against the Tutsi. I'm going to illustrate this point with a recent news bulletin by the Deutsche Welle television station, and I encourage you to look for it on YouTube. And the segment is called 30 Years On, Talking with Those Who Survived the Rwandan Genocide. This particular segment has an African female anchor, which already lowers our guard as Africans, and we are not as critical as we would have been. Putting aside the documentaries insistent that only 800,000 people were killed, what is fascinating about that bulletin is that it pits survivors against genocide deniers in the name of democratic politics. The problem becomes clearer when we talk about politics, which is a question of power. Excuse me. Deutsche Welle TV fails to note the role of the then Rwandan government and the elites, the education system, and the media in creating a wave of extremism. And I've seen there's something written here about genocide starts with an idea. That means us. This is our territory, ideas. Instead, we are told that genocide occurs when extremists from the majority ethnic Hutus waged war against the influential majority Tutsi population. We have to pause there for a minute. The TV segment is telling us that the genocide was ethnic and it was a civil conflict. 2, that the Tutsi were influential, and 3, that the state had no role to play in the genocide. The Tutsi could not have been influential since the Belgians had reduced the monarchy to a stooge in the early 19th century, and extremists had been in power since 1962, actually since 1959. We need to explain again and again the problem with ethnicizing the genocide. Many have done so by pointing out that the so-called Rwandan ethnicities were not real ethnicities but colonial constructs. So I will not belabor that point. The issue for me here today among intellectuals is that the focus on ethnicity is a European liberal problem. As Issa Shivji, the Tanzanian scholar, once said, liberalism decontextualizes and abstracts the human being. The result is that liberalism judges us not by our actions and our thoughts for which we can be held responsible, but by our identity, which we can't change. Of course, such a dehumanizing way of thinking was constructed by Europe to allow them to exploit Africa, because it allowed the West to say that it is rich because it is white, not because it is exploiting us, and we Africans are poor because we are black, not because we are exploited. But before we have time to reflect on this, the Deutsche Welle news bulletin moves to a survivor of the genocide. The journalist, Marielle Müller, walks us through the Nyamata Genocide Memorial, from where the genocide survivor, Chantal Uwiriga, escaped with serious injuries. I wonder whether due diligence was taken to be sensitive to her trauma, but I will leave that aside. My point is that the role of this section is to appeal to our empathy, which is fair enough, because after all, we cannot understand the genocide if we don't do so through the eyes of the survivors. The problem becomes more obvious to a trained eye, not to a passive observer, when one notices that the people interviewed as victims and perpetrators are villagers with limited political power. The journalist throws the dishonest question to the villagers about forgiveness. Forgiveness is a complex philosophical question which requires more than a simple yes or no answer. But that's not what Müller is looking for. The question of forgiveness is designed to maintain the genocide as a personal and individual matter, not a political one. For Deutsche Welle TV, the only political problem was that Rwanda was facing is a ruler who has stayed too long in office. For help with stressing this point, the journalist seeks the performance of none other than Victoire Ingabire. The question the journalist asks her is insidious. Has the current government dealt with the divisions that led to the genocide? Remember, the news bulletin has already framed the problem as an ethnic one. And true to form, Ingabire continues with the double genocide thesis and says nothing about the role of the West in the genocide. And really, she can't talk about the political aspect of the genocide because, as I have argued in another publication where I discuss her arguments, her political career rides on espousing the principles of liberalism. She fits the profile of an opposition which liberalism considers necessary for politics. She gives us the usual talking points that the West loves to throw at Africa: development, term limits, electoral competition, threat to government, blah, blah, blah. After that interview, the next interview is of a Rwandan filmmaker, Samuel Ishimwe, who has done an excellent documentary on the colonial roots of the genocide. Funnily enough, Christine Muhundwa starts her interview by saying she did not know that the Hutus and Tutsis were not ethnicities but social groups, even though the first half of the news report has been about ethnicity. And then her interview of Ishimwe proceeds to personal loss in terms of the murder of his parents during the genocide. Now, why am I going over all these tiny details? It's because my point is that the heaviest weight of genocide denial in this segment is not in the small arguments, like the genocide was ethnic, or in interviewing a genocide denier. To see the weight of the genocide denial, you have to look at the whole news segment in its totality, in terms of the sequence of the stories and the point that is being made. The video introduces the idea of genocide being an ethnic conflict. Then it numbs our minds with melodrama through following a genocide survivor. And then it frames the current political issue as a matter of elections and finishes off with the interview of a filmmaker. So of the Rwandans who are interviewed in this segment, one is talking about pain, the other one is talking about electoral politics, and the other one is talking about cultural history. They may all be talking about genocide, but they are all talking at cross purposes. The only consistency in this news segment is the German journalist herself, whose job is to reiterate, without saying so in so many words, that the genocide was African tribes fighting each other and who need to forgive, reconcile, and embrace Western liberal democracy. The political problem that we are dealing with here is simple. It's intellectual laxity. And we are in a university, so we can talk about that. And the university is the place to talk about it. If Deutsche Welle TV wanted to do justice to its obsession with two opposing sides, they should have interviewed someone to contrast Ingabire's views. If we must stick to the simplistic two sides of a story formula, we must compare equal actors. A survivor of the genocide and an opposition politician are not equals. One is talking about personal pain, the other one is talking about power and ideology. Similarly, the emphasis on the West's involvement in the genocide being colonial means that the genocide is fixed in the past, and the only present left up to Rwandans is to forgive at a personal level and at a political level hold elections. But are we sure that the problem of colonial categories is stuck in the past with no life in the present? The value of pitting genocide survivors against genocide-denying politicians is to basically push the ideology that genocide and colonialism belong to the past and that the job of Africans is to sort out your identities, you know, and forgive one another, you know. When it comes to politics and the present, what we need is Western liberal democracy. In the end, the news bulletin leaves us under the impression that it has discussed the genocide, but it hasn't, because it does not discuss the role of the state, the elites like us who are in universities, the media, and the international community in setting up the conditions for the genocide to take place. We are essentially back to the colonial divide: culture for Africans, political economy for Europeans. The past for Africans, history for Europeans. Nothing has changed except the aura of imperialism. The structures and the logic remain intact. Let me clarify that my remarks are not calling for ignoring the regional aftermath of the genocide against the Tutsi or ignoring the political dilemmas with which Rwandans and the entire region grapple. My point is that we cannot understand them if we are using simplistic liberal formulas that are hostile to complexity. The gist of my reflections today is that knowledge, how we think, and with whom we are discussing our ideas, remains a central issue in remembering the genocide and rebuilding Rwanda. We Africans and East Africans must take the commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi as a duty for all of us. All the struggles of Rwandans to understand, to heal, to recover, and to remember are the struggles in which Africans across the world have been engaged for the last 5 centuries of colonialism and racism. The practice of having conversations like the one we have here today as East Africans amongst ourselves must be streamlined. We need centers of East African studies in our universities where we commit to learning each other's histories and having conversations amongst ourselves. While I am grateful that my learning about the genocide against the Tutsis was triggered by a Senegalese writer in the United States, we all know that this model of education is elitist and unsustainable. We must therefore make conversations more frequent and more accessible to the people of our region. And this leads me to my exhortation to the young Africans and East Africans in this room. Your duty is not limited to understanding what happened in Rwanda that culminated with the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994. You must go a step further. You must pursue knowledge, as Professor Olufemi Taiwo said in his TED Talk. Again, YouTube, look it up. He says in his TED Talk that we must pursue knowledge with maniacal commitment. Do not listen to ideologies that lock history in the past. Do not, as he said, accept the lie that studying and learning is only for jobs and employers. If we restrict pursuing knowledge to solving problems in sight, we will never be able to deal with new problems as they arise. And we have already heard from the speakers that genocide denial mutates. So we will not be able to keep up if we are not studying for the sake of knowledge. We have made a step forward as Africans and as Rwandans in ensuring that the West does not make us avoid history. In fact, the people who put the genocide against the Tutsi on the historical map were Rwandans themselves. They refused to stop talking about it. But now it is you, young people, our children, who will teach us not only to know what happened, but how to make our history a living present and the foundation of our future. Teach us, young people of Africa, teach us how to resist the onslaught of liberalism that seduces us with notions of equality, but in reality reduces and imprisons our humanity in identity, our memory in moralism of forgiveness, and our history is locked in the past. So that it appears that we Africans need Western interventions to enter the present. In the words of the poem by African-American poet Nikki Giovanni, you young people must invent new games and teach us older ones how to play. I hope that today you can tell us, the elders, what you think could be a way forward. So once again, thank you, Your Excellencies, for this moment. I'm so honored to be a Kenyan in Uganda talking about Rwanda. And thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. and in the memory of the victims of the genocide against the Tutsi, with compassion for the survivors and in honor of our African ancestors, and in solidarity with my fellow East Africans, I want to end with these words: Mungu ibariki Africa. May God bless Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wandia, for that very beautiful storytelling of different African stories, all weaved into a very compelling and a very compelling keynote with fresh outlook to intellectualism and discussing very complex issues such as the conversation we're having today. I like that you presented us several challenges, and one of them is that Africans must not wait for others to document our history, and this is where we don't do very well. Documenting our history and telling our stories, and how internationally the rest of the world is still influencing how we see ourselves and how we connect with each other. And so the importance of documenting in our history and writing our own stories. I was also intrigued by and challenged by your critique of liberalism, the new take on liberalism, and its place, which you refer to as linear, narrow-minded, and hostile to complexity. I really love that. I'd like to hear, I'm sure our panel is going to go into that conversation, and I'm really looking forward to doing that, to listening to that. But I also like that you brought out its failures, particularly through the media, in terms of perpetuating and fomenting narratives which become facts if we do not challenge them. So the importance, again, for us to be engaged and investing in media that sort of tell our stories and be able to be present, like you did, to be here to speak and to present to us these very compelling stories. And if we don't, you've clearly outlined how genocide denial finds very fertile ground, and also gives those who are looking to fomenting conflict and hate to find comfortable spaces to continue doing so. And also that you reminded us that we also, as we have these conversations, the compassion of thinking about the genocide survivors and making sure that their stories continue to be heard, and for us to, in a way, protect their memories by continuously fighting against genocide denial. So many points that you've raised out: the role of politics in the state, the centrality of foreign interests in continuing to lead to conflict in Africa, and also lead to genocide, and the importance for spaces like, intellectual spaces like Makerere and Delta University where you are, the importance of investing in documenting and facilitating these kind of complex conversations, especially with young people, as a way of protecting our heritage, but also making sure that the future is something they can look forward to. So thank you so much for those insights, and I'm sure a lot of young people here are looking forward to the conversation. So now we're going into a panel, which is yes, so we're going into a panel, and we have a distinguished moderator, Dr. Zara Nampeo, who is the Deputy Principal at the School of Law, and also the immediate former Director of Human Rights and Peace Center at the School of Law at Makerere University. She's very passionate about human rights and women's rights and enjoys working with young people. So you're in the right place. And so we look forward to your perspective. So I'd like to invite you so that you can introduce your panel, and then we can continue with the discussion. Thank you very much.
Your Excellencies, Deputy Vice Chancellor, our distinguished guests, our dear students, our keynote speaker, good afternoon. I have the honor to moderate the panel discussion this afternoon, and I feel already overwhelmed by the excellent keynote that has been presented to us. May I ask for a round of applause for the keynote speaker. After witnessing the Nazi atrocities during World War II, the world vowed never again. And we passed the 1948 UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. But the never again, which was a prayer, a promise, a vow, was broken in 1994 with the genocide against the Tutsis. A distinctive and defining terribleness, a moral terribleness. In one case before the International Criminal Tribunal of Rwanda, prosecutor versus Kambanda, the trial chamber stated that the crime of genocide is unique because of its element of special intent, which requires that the crime be committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Such terribleness. It is therefore imperative that we continue to talk about this issue, and in fact, the 30th commemoration marks a generational cycle since that very unfortunate event. And of course, as Makerere University, as we celebrate 102 years of existence, we continue to reflect on the challenges in our country, in our region, as part of transforming the region. Therefore, the focus on genocide for us as a university, as a community, is very relevant. So thank you very much, Your Excellency High Commissioner, for bringing this conversation here. And this afternoon, I'm joined by a very distinguished panel of persons well-versed with this issue, and I'm going to invite them, as I read out their credentials, to come and join me up here on the podium. We have Ambassador Ngoga Pascal. Ambassador, you're very welcome. Kindly join us. Former Ambassador of Rwanda to Ethiopia, the State of Israel and Sudan. Ambassador Ngoga is former Senior Political Affairs Officer at the UN, and the former lecturer with the United World College, Trieste in Italy. I also have Mr. Kwezi Tabaro. Mr. Tabaro is Deputy Director of the Leo Africa Institute. You're very welcome. And my third panelist this afternoon is Dr. Jude Kagoro, a researcher, postdoctoral fellow at the Institute for Intercultural and International Studies in Bremen University. And together we'll take up about 45 minutes or so to talk about the issue of genocide against the Tutsis and the 30th commemoration. Let me join them. So gentlemen, you're very warmly welcome once again. Dr. Njoya, in your keynote, you mentioned that it is very difficult to discuss the genocide against the Tutsis in Kenya and perhaps even in many other places. It is still a sensitive topic, but even when a wound is still fresh, it has to be dealt with in order for it to heal. I'd like to invite my panelists in about 5 minutes each to give their perspective of the keynote. Dr. Njoya has mentioned that the genocide was fairly complex. She highlights the laid-back approach of the international community, deliberate or ignorant, whichever it could have been, the undue emphasis on the Western powers' involvement in the genocide, the continued narrative of denial and confusion with politics, and also claiming that this is rooted in our colonial legacy. I'll start with Ambassador Ngoga. Can you give us your perspective about the keynote in 5 minutes?
Basically, 5 minutes is a very, 5 minutes is a very short time to talk about the genocide, particularly when you have been part of it, not part of it as a participant or as a victim, but as an associate of the victims. And many times also talking to the participants. The African Union had a panel of eminent personalities headed by Chetumile Masile. And I happened to be an advisor to the African Union panel. And after their discussions and research and so on, they went to Rwanda, and I went with them to Rwanda. Late President Chetumile Masile asked me to look for somebody who had killed many people, and he wanted to talk to him. So I went to the prison and requested for somebody that would talk to President Chetumile Masile. And the gentleman they brought, Chetumile Masile very friendly, asked him, first of all, before we even discuss, how many people did you kill? And the man looked at him and said, sir, they said you were a president, so Your Excellency. Genocide through the eyes of the survivors. But for those who have read Levi Primo, who wrote a book called The Drowned and the Saved. He was a Jew and survived the genocide. And he insists that we can talk about survivors, yes, because we talk to them. But there are others that are involved in the genocide whom we are not able to talk to, and those should always be in the back of our mind. In the back of our minds are those who drowned. The survivors survived, yes. But there are those, in case of Rwanda, there is 1 million that never survived. It's very difficult for me to think and get as deep as what they felt when they died. I always think about that. So as we focus on preventing genocide from happening again, as we focus on helping and supporting survivors, let's also deeply think about those millions who did not survive, those whom Levi calls the drowned. That's number one. Point number two, she referred to the extension of the genocide in the neighborhood in Rwanda. 30 years have now ended. We still have this genocidal moving around in the Congo forests. And from there, they've been committing atrocities, killing not only Tutsis this time, but killing Kinyarwanda speakers in DRC. And we have made it occasionally political discussions and summit discussions, but we have not made an effort to say, oh, by the way, 1948 we said never again. And again, after the genocide in Rwanda, we promised never again. And still we have in our midst the killings of people because they are them and you are you. I will request later to have at least a few more minutes to give you a background to the warnings that have been made by very many outstanding people who have been to the DRC and have said, no, what is happening is terribly dangerous. And I'll end with the quotation, from one of them. This is the quotation from a Kenyan lady, Alice Wairimu Nderitu, who is the special advisor to the United Nations on genocide. And after visiting Congo, she says, in the East DRC, the current violence mainly stemmed from the refugee crisis that resulted as many individuals involved in the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda fled to Eastern DRC, forming armed groups such as FDLR, which is still active presently in the east of DRC. That's only at the end of last year. After 30 years, we have an advisor against genocide saying, by the way, genocide, a slow genocide, has been taking place for the last 30 years. So as we commemorate 30 years of genocide that took place in Rwanda, we need to make sure that indeed we keep the word never again alive. We need to keep reminding ourselves never again, never again, never again.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Ngoga has emphasized and warned that genocide may perhaps not be behind us, because as we all know, genocide is not an event, it is a process, and there are indicators, and we need to be mindful if there are writings on the wall. Dr. Kagoro, your making of the keynote and your reflections generally.
Thank you very much. I was actually listening to Dr. Wandia, and it was so interesting how I connect with almost everything she was saying. Almost everything she was saying. And I will give a little bit of notes on these imperialist distortions. about the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Recently, at the end of March, I was actually invited by a certain European newspaper to give my perspective on Rwanda. And this newspaper was planning an issue on the 30th anniversary of the genocide against the Tutsi. But wait a minute, they did not put it like that. They called it genocide in Rwanda. And this newspaper wanted my perspective on several issues. One, they wanted the political situation in Rwanda. They wanted to know how the country is dealing with the security. They wanted to know how Rwanda is involved in DRC. They wanted to know the risk of authoritarianism. To me, these issues were too many to contextualize to put in the context of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. I was very skeptical how to go about this, but I accepted, thinking that perhaps I can open a discussion about many of these issues and my skepticism about how they were framing issues. So on 10th of April, the interview, well, somehow took place. I'll give you more notes on that. But we disagreed on the very beginning because the journalist insisted and arrogantly told me that for them, officially, it is genocide in Rwanda, and they're not going to change that. Already, I was already thrown off, because if you disagree on the framing, it's difficult to actually proceed with the interview. And here I remembered, because I paid attention to His Excellency President Paul Kagame's speech, and he pointed out something very important, that he clearly said that, that being intentionally vague about who was targeted in 1994 genocide is a clear denial. So basically here, I was going to debate with denial of genocide. I realized this is interesting because Dr. Wandia was already talking about Deutsche Welle. This actually was being pushed in that corner already, because many of journalists, intellectuals, and politicians in the Western world, they like to think that they have monopoly over framing whatever happens in Africa. They seek to validate. What is sad is that many African intellectuals actually fall prey to this kind of, this is fraud actually. We fall prey because many of our fellow Africans tend to demonize Africa and glorify what is happening in the West. The other perspective I wanted to point out is the importance of Kwibuka. You can imagine, if you look around this audience, I think many people, young students, are below the age of 30. And in Rwanda alone, 75% of the population is actually below the age of 35. They have no memory or recollection. And I think here it's very important that we continue this conversation so that we understand, as Ambassador was saying, we already have things happening in the region that are actually genocide. we're already seeing what is happening in DRC. The people there, the Tutsis, they are being killed. Some have run away, they are refugees. But most important for us to note is these people have a lot of support, state support from different circles, and moreover happening under the watch of the international community. It is there. But it's happening again, and yet we are saying never again. The other aspect I liked about Dr. Wandia's talk about Africa and East Africans. We need to take this as our own issue. Because genocide, first and foremost, can happen anywhere. Because when you go into a discussion with some people here in Uganda and other African countries, it's like genocide is a preserve of other communities. It can't touch us, or it can't be in Kenya, it can't be in Uganda or any other place. So that disconnect means that we have not had a deep conversation about what happened in Rwanda in 1994. Now, she also pointed out a call to establish a center for East African studies, which I like, because we don't know much about each other. And this takes me back to 1994, when genocide was happening in Rwanda. I was in a school called St. Leo's College, Chegobe, in Fort Portal. We had a sizable number of Rwandans in that school at that time. Genocide was happening. No one, no teacher, no person of authority explained to us what was going on. We were busy cramming the French Revolution, talking about Bismarck, talking about Napoleon Bonaparte, and next door, you have a genocide taking place. And amidst you, there are actually people losing relatives in the same space where the genocide is taking place. And you're busy talking about German unification and Italian. No, I think that is really, it challenges us to begin rethinking about some of these things that we are taking lightly. And here I would like to conclude by quoting His Excellency President Paul Kagame, who recently said that only we as Africans can value our lives. Only we as Africans can value our lives, and it is our duty to preserve memory, tell our story as we have lived it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kagoro. The narrative of genocide denial and who is framing the narrative, and the role of actors in inciting more genocide, and the need for us as Africans to take over the framing and also to be in charge of our own destiny. So thank you very much, Dr. Kagoro, for raising those issues. Now let me come to you, Mr. Tabaro. Yes, what did you make of the keynote and your general reflection?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Zahra Nampeo. I think, being the youngest on the panel, I will prefer to cede most of my time to my more senior colleagues. And my approach will be in two ways. One, in direct, I think, response to Dr. Wandia Njoya's presentation. How is such lack of knowledge on the genocide possible? It could be excused outside of Africa, but how is it possible in Africa, in East Africa, or even in Uganda? I think that's a very pertinent issue, since we're at a knowledge institution. you need to just go back to the timeline 30 years ago. From the 3rd to the 8th of April, 1994, there was a major conference happening in Kampala, the Pan-African Congress, and it's one of the, if you looked at Uganda's history, probably one of the most progressive moments that, that we've had. And various liberation movements were represented at that Pan-African conference. Glowing speeches were made about Pan-Africanism and unity, and I'm sure many Makerere academicians were at that conference. But what is rather sad is that even before the conference ended, the RPF was also represented at that conference. The genocide happened. The genocide started on April the 7th, just a day before the close of that conference that was ideally meant to provide the path that would rid Africa of events like the genocide. So knowledge of African events becomes very important, especially for the young generation, because when you read some of the responses and the conversations that young Africans are having on social media, especially in light of events like this one, you'd think that the preparation, perpetuation of the genocide happened elsewhere and was transported to Rwanda on April the 7th, which is not the case. And I think that's the role that public institutions like Makerere can play, to continuously encourage discussion and debate on significant events that are happening here, not elsewhere in the world. And I think the way our academia, and Dr. Wandia mentioned it very clearly, the way our academia approaches developments in our countries is that for you to understand a neighboring country like Kenya, you need usually a Western intermediary. So a report by the World Bank, an academic at the School of Oriental and African Studies, and not necessarily a research out of the University of Nairobi. I think if there's anything that the young generation present here can take from this conversation is that knowledge, especially knowledge of what's happening in our context, in our countries, is very important. Much as knowledge of what else is happening in the world is important, I think our own understanding of what's happening is very important. Now, to the subject of genocide. Why does lack of knowledge persist? First of all, genocide is a very heinous crime. So whoever commits it knows it's a serious crime with serious implications. So therefore, they need to hide the fact that they were involved or they acquiesced in the crime of genocide. And the people or the parties responsible partly or in full for the genocide also control the machinery with which we receive information. They guide our view of the world. They define what is progressive, what is cool, what is not. So it's not surprising that in a crime where they are complicit, either in full or in part, that they would want obfuscation of what happened by creating either alternative accounts or revisionist accounts of what could have transpired. But for the young people who are in the audience today, to just give you a perfect example of how heinous and serious the crime of genocide is, I'll refer to a story that Dr. Kagoro and I were discussing a few days ago. I traveled with Dr. Kagoro to Rwanda about 5 years ago, and we're doing research on the country, and we engaged, discussed with various people, decision makers in government, people in security, and we had this very interesting story that will try to give you an insight on how the genocide was organized, because it was a very democratic exercise, organized by the elites and the state, but committed by peasants across the board. So there was this remote place or island in an area called Rweru that was so remote that they could not have known what was happening in the rest of the country during the genocide. And according to the interview subject that we spoke to, there was this lonely Tutsi fellow who had just immigrated to that area, again, a few days or weeks before the genocide. And throughout the 2 or 3 months that the madness of the genocide was happening, this area was so remote they didn't know what was happening. But as soon as the inhabitants of this area got to know what was happening in the rest of the country, they went and looked for this lone Tutsi guy and killed him. That's how serious the issue of genocide is, and why the ideology of genocide denial is prevalent, because it's such a heinous crime and the perpetrators are keen to bury it in alternative history. The second point is the significance of events like these, but also the significance of Rwanda's post-genocide recovery journey. Because it's not just important for the citizens of Rwanda and the government of Rwanda, it's a significant milestone and example for many African countries that are trying to deal with an experience that could slightly be equated to Rwanda, because the violence of the genocide is more or less the same as the violence of colonialism that many African countries experienced, that many African countries are the product of. Uganda is not the product of a discussion amongst the disparate groups that live in this geographical area called Uganda today, that we should form a union called Uganda. It's a result of a very violent exercise that defined lines and names and ascribed borders and nationalities to these countries. So Rwanda's post-genocide recovery journey gives you an example of how a country can reimagine itself. When this event was starting, you had the Rwanda national anthem. This is a recent anthem that came to life in the aftermath of the genocide. The Rwandan flag you see there is a recent outcome of the reconstruction of the country. The country changed in many ways, in its outlook, in its symbols, in how it engages with the world, the countries it considers as friends and allies, and those that consider it an enemy or a very troublesome country. And I think many Africans can learn from that experience. That one, renewal is possible. That number two, you can change. You might have very difficult circumstances, but they cannot determine your fate. Because Rwanda, on July the 4th, 1994, could have driven in an entirely different direction. We could have had, as we've seen in many African countries, an arbiter come into the country, the UN. The UN forced to stand between the Tutsis and the Hutus, organize elections where the majority wins, and then it doesn't matter what happens after that, as long as they have elections. They never did that. Or they could have opted for the option of the winners and victors, in this case, the RPF, or the victims, the Tutsis, choosing vengeance against the perpetrators. They had now the state in their hands, they had the backing of the international community, but they didn't do that. Or they could have chosen to relegate themselves to being a basket case where the elites thrive on the guilt of the international community to extract rent, to extract aid, to engage in corruption, and shield themselves from blame by saying, look, you ignored us, so therefore you can't tell us anything. But they did the most difficult thing, which is to ask victims of such a heinous crime to look in the eyes of their perpetrators and forgive them and live with them and build a country together. And many of those perpetrators today, or people who were in the government that perpetrated the genocide, still serve in the unity government in Rwanda today. But also the politics of the country could have been that you have a majority Hutu party and a majority Tutsi party, but they chose national unity, a government of almost national unity where ethnicity plays no role in the national politics. I think the success of such an approach has been underappreciated by the world, and more especially and sadly by us Africans. And I think this is something that the new generation can learn from, that you don't need to look elsewhere for what a post-recovery society looks like, but much closer to home with what Rwanda is trying to do. It may still fail, But I think the boldness of the attempt is very significant for many progressive Africans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kwesi, for highlighting the role of different actors, the states who are at a conference. Dr. Kagoro mentioned the individuals, the teachers who are busy teaching Bismarck, and whoever else, the Battle of Waterloo, while, lives were being taken. And, that just goes to show that mobilizing thousands of Rwandans to slaughter others not only required effective organization, but it succeeded so well because perhaps one section of the population was already prepared to hate and fear another section. So there was deliberateness on one side. But that brings me now to the other end. It has been pointed out the role of the state, the elite, the media, the international community in setting up the conditions for the genocide to take place. But we also then need to look beyond that occurrence. What genocide prevention strategies should we be thinking of? What more is there that we can do, especially now that we are talking to 75% of a population that only sees genocide, that did not experience, that hears it in stories. Mr. Ngoga, you had wanted to start on that. Perhaps we can get back to you. Now we are forward-looking. How do we take this narrative forward, and especially involving the future generation, the youth? In another 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much to give me this chance to expound on the point that I had started on. I want to talk about three things. Number one, I talked about the extension or the outreach of the perpetrators of genocide in our neighborhood. Two, I want to also mention something about the warnings that have been made and probably ignored. And just to emphasize that, please, we may not ignore, otherwise we may have to have another session the year to come or 2 years to come to look at another genocide that took place in our midst, and we're looking. And I want to try and propose a way forward. So, one, I just wanted to say that, when the genocide forces, when I say genocide forces, I mean the government forces in Rwanda, basically after losing the war to RPF, they now turned to the population, particularly the Tutsi population in Rwanda. They got busy killing, probably that's why they even lost the war. And after they were defeated 30 years ago, they moved to the neighboring country, then Zaire. And when they arrived, they were received, as it's usually its job, by UNHCR and other organizations. They built them camps. One was in Goma, actually about less than a kilometer from the Rwandan border. Another one was in Bukavu. And these camps were for both the population, the innocent, some who had participated in the genocide, and then the army and the militia called Interahamwe, who basically had been trained the whole of that period as the war went on from 1990 to 94 in Rwanda. This group was training for genocide, training for massacres, and not using guns, but using pangas. So they settled, and they got posho for those who have been refugees, like refugees get, but they remained, most importantly, they remained in their military formation, training and recruiting. In the end, that's what brought about the first Congo War, basically the Congo War that Rwanda and Uganda got involved in and resulted in the overthrow of President, His Excellency Mobutu Sese Seko Wazabanga. That problem sustained. They kept on crossing into Rwanda, killing people, and Rwanda insisted on demanding that they move the camps to far away from the border. But they didn't only go into Rwanda, they actually also targeted the Banyamulenge. That's when I heard about Banyamulenge first, that word. But somehow, they targeted them. And it so happens that the Banyamulenge joined Rwanda and Uganda, and for political, that one I don't want to go into it. It ended up overthrowing Mobutu and installing a new president, the old His Excellency Kabila. Now, soon after that, President Kabila realized that, his population was actually looking down on him because they said he was a puppet of Rwanda and Uganda. So to show and prove his toughness, he expelled the Rwandese and Ugandan forces from DRC that time. He had changed the name. Now, after expelling those, it didn't end there. There was a campaign against the two nations, and in the end, it also ended into another war. I don't want to go into that one again. But I just want to use that to see that, the perpetrators of genocide, much as they had been beaten in Rwanda, they kind of managed to survive in DRC, and in fact, made an alliance with the new government of Kabila and later his son, and now they still have that relationship. They still actually fight together with the government army currently against M23. They still do. And here we also have, unfortunately, a few mercenaries and others who have joined. And we can't pause and say, hey, by the way, what is this war about? Against M23, who are they? What are they? It's only about 2-3 days ago that the president of South Africa was in Rwanda, and then he also came here, and particularly trying, I'm hoping, to understand what's actually this M23. Are they what the government calls them? Or are they people trying to fight for their right to live in that country as citizens of that country? I'll give 5 warnings that have been given by most outstanding personalities in the area of human rights. The first one, as I said, was the advisor to the United Nations on genocide. And I read her statement after visiting DRC. The second warning, probably on this one I'll put a bit of emphasis because the address was for the youth. And if we look at the genocide in Rwanda and how it happened, it's mainly the youth, the Interahamwe that the government used. Because the youth are easier to use, give them a drink, give them something to smoke, and they'll be merry and they'll kill when they are misdirected. The president of the Republic of the Democratic Republic of Congo, last year in May, called upon the young people of Congo to form, I quote, to form vigilante groups to fight against the foreign invaders and their supporters. I don't want to politicize this. I'm only quoting the president's words. Now, when His Excellency says that to his youth, that they formed vigilante groups to kill other Congolese whom he does not want to believe are Congolese, simply because they speak another language which a neighboring country speaks.
And how do we counter that narrative and message it for our youth then? Because now we are moving forward. How do we counter?
Good. I'm just getting to that. And I just wanted to put that, those are two examples of, so that we later do not say, no, we didn't know. We never had. We didn't know the genocide was taking place. No, we know. If we didn't know, please look around. Those are two examples of the signs of genocide. Number 3, the African Union last week appointed a man called Adama Dieng, a Senegalese, who has been in the field of human rights for quite some time and actually was the one that Alice Wairimu replaced. And Adama Dieng says, since the government decided to declare martial law in northern Kivu and Ituri after the attack of M23, they staged what they called state of siege. And in May 21, atrocities and violence have escalated. Since 2022, more than 1,300 people have been killed in Ituri and northern Kivu alone. 1,300 people, Rwanda speakers, have been killed for speaking that language. And they are Congolese. These are Congolese who have never moved from Congo, who have always lived in Congo since time immemorial. That's number 3. Number 4, another warning. This one, on the 4th of October 2011, a vehicle from a humanitarian organization called SNEZA was ambushed in the Karugwe village in South Kivu near Fizi town. After passengers were separated according to their ethnic origin, 7 Banyamulenge were killed, while those of other ethnic groups were set free. This reminds us, this is now my personal comment, it reminds us, those from Rwanda, it reminds us about the Nyanja girls. During the genocide, a girls' school, the killers arrived there and tried to separate the students, told the Tutsis to go left and the Hutus to go right, or vice versa, one of the two.
And the examples are numerous, Mr.
And
Bob.
the girls refused.
Yes.
And
as you wind up, Mr. Ngoga.
And all the girls were killed. And all the girls were killed. Now the way forward, you demand. Number one, I think we all know that it is the primary responsibility to protect the citizens of a country against genocide or crimes against humanity or ethnic cleansing, whatever. It is the responsibility of the government, surely. It's the responsibility of the DRC government not to mobilize the youth for killing, but to mobilize the people for reconciliation.
Right.
Number two, therefore. Number two, I'm sorry. Now, number two.
I'm about to put in a claim.
Sorry? No,
Go ahead.
No, they're all facts. Number two, apart from the government, I would propose that, the parliament of DRC should adopt a law on xenophobia and tribalism to stop the hate speech and incitement to violence. That's very clear. Number three, the DRC government should also hold those who spread hate to account. I think that's clear. Number four, the parties to the agreement of March 23. When we talk about M23, by the way, we are basically referring to an agreement signed between the Congo government and this movement, signed on the 23rd of March, and which the government never implemented. That's why this movement began to fight again. So all I'm saying is they should renegotiate that agreement, see the elements that they need, and see those they don't need, and get them out. And lastly, the African Union, at least this one I know, Article 4H of the Constitutive Act of the African Union says that the African Union has the responsibility to stop genocide where the country is particularly not keen to do it or is reluctant to do it. This article, I mention it because it was formed when we formed the African Union, and I happened to be the ambassador of Rwanda, and I sat and pushed for this point to be put there. It can be employed, it's never been used, it should be used. And lastly, Madam, we have the UN, which also have the responsibility to protect. That's one they can use. But also the 1948 Genocide Convention on the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide. We have all these in our hands. We can use them to stop the genocide before it happens. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ambassador. You have placed the DRC right at the spot. But who bails the cat? Is it the East African community? Is it the AU? Is it individual states? That's the big question. And where is the youth in all this? How do we mobilize the youth for a positive struggle. Dr. Jude, can you give us some of the prevention strategies and some of the meaningful things that we can take away as we involve our youthful counterparts here and beyond?
Thank you. The prevention strategies. I'll talk about mostly the discipline of the state of Rwanda, how I see it, and what I see that is being done in Rwanda. But first, I need to tell you that I've been engaged in research in Rwanda for the past 7 years. And many things have really impressed me, what is being done there. I first went to Rwanda. I'm giving this background because it is very relevant to what I'm going to say later. The first 2 times were in 1998 and 2003. I just went to watch football, but football is not what took me. I was so curious about this country and what had happened in Rwanda, and I wanted to get a first-hand experience of what was happening there. Because I followed the Liberation War. I was really young in primary 7 when the Liberation War started in Rwanda. And I remember listening to BBC about the death of Fred Rwigema, Major General Fred Rwigema, which was really devastating to me personally because, yeah, I mean, he was a hero. And this goes to the discipline and also the prevention strategies. Because when I joined secondary in 1991 in St. Leo's College, I found a fair tale about the Rwandans who overnight disappeared from school without anyone outside their structure knowing where they were going. That discipline, that these were teenagers meanwhile. These were teenagers because this is O-levels, a secondary school. These were teenagers, but even that time, they had a historical mission, very disciplined, and going for the struggle. Now, before that, I had interfaced with so many Rwandans in Toro, where I come from. There were so many Rwandans, and I didn't actually know that these were people from another country. They spoke the language. They had Kitoro names. They even had Impako, in Toro. And they spoke, I did not understand the complexity of their condition until much later. And then the first 2 times, you could see a devastated country, a lot of insecurity. And when they went back, in 2005, 2006, as a facilitator at a peace camp, I interact with young Rwandans. I went as a facilitator, but I ended up being a student because I was learning too much. Now, these people, one after another, shared very tough stories to internalize. I was even wondering how these people were coping with this experience, first-hand experience that they had actually gone through. Meanwhile, at this peace camp, we had survivors, we had those who had lost relatives, but we also had relatives of the genocideers in one space. That actually, to me, was the beginning, the mental infrastructure that prepared reconciliation. Young people who are from different, sides in the conflict, and it was still very fresh, together in one space. And when you talk to them, it was very clear that for them, the only way forward for Rwanda was reconciliation. I could tell. And that was a very interesting perspective for me. And later, in that same process, I managed to attend some gachacha sessions. Oh, this was incredible. You know, like, you go there, these were ordinary people discussing very complex issues that even international community had failed to resolve. But sitting under a tree, talking about very complex issues, and actually they found very interesting solutions. And later, I somehow disconnected. From 2003, I went for PhD studies in Germany, and while there, my perspective of Rwanda began to be even, clouded, because whoever was discussing Rwanda was discussing negative things, with a little bit of interludes about the good things that were happening. But you could clearly see that, oh, it's just like any other African country. They're always fighting against each other, etc. And then I go back. After 10 years, Andrew Mwenda has gone, is the one who took me in 2016. I was shocked what I found. That period between 2003 and 2016, 2006 and 2016, amazing. You could clearly see that the unity, the commitment towards solving, towards the creation of the new Rwanda was really in action. You could really see it in action. Now, I would like to conclude by saying something. I like studying state from below. You know, you can study the state structures and all these things, but for me, I like looking at things from below, and you learn a lot. Now, in Rwanda, I'm very much connected to a specific village called Kagarama. It is in Eastern Province, in Gatsibo district, sector of Gitoke. In 2018, I discovered that this little village was crime-free. They had not experienced any major crime for 3 consecutive years. To me, it was fascinating. I wanted to know what is this. I decided to go there, and I visited that village so many times. Well, I visited other villages. They are not so different from this specific village, because in Rwanda you can clearly see the bottom, as in the local structures, clearly mirroring what is happening on top. You can clearly see the ideological clarity of the last man at the periphery of the periphery, speaking the same language, not language literally, but understanding the historical mission that the Rwandan state has embarked on. Something intrigued me in that village, and in other villages. There is what they call Enyangamigayo. I might pronounce it wrongly, I might be speaking Kitoro, but is it correct? Yeah, Enyangamigayo. Now, for them, leadership is not just position. You don't just come from nowhere to take a position. And this is across the board in Rwanda. The Inyangamigayo, meaning honesty, integrity. You have to demonstrate integrity for you to hold any political position, any leadership position at any level. Now, in that village, it was so key. And you could see how they replicated what was happening at the top. They had what they call a mihigo, the performance contract. Even at that level, they set for themselves what the leaders are supposed to do and what the leaders are supposed to achieve in order for them to justify being in that position. Now, what also struck me was how these people, at the local level, poor as they were, collecting money to purchase land for the community, not for any individual. You just imagine this in any other country, African country, people contributing little as they can to buy land, and then on that land to build an office for their village, so that they can separate the village, personal business from public business. And they achieved that. They collected the money, and they did not only stop there. They also made sure that everybody in this community was on what they call mutuelle de santé. I don't know. I don't speak French. But this is the insurance policy for all villagers. Now, there is no form of reconciliation. There is no form of commitment that can beat this. People coming together to understand the historical mission, to replicate what the state is doing, and actually implementing certain unbelievable things at their level for the progress of themselves and for the progress of Rwanda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The need for a clear message from the top, and then relying on the discipline, to ensure that it is spread across, and relying on the discipline and integrity of the youth and calling upon the youth. Mr. Tabaro, can you give your wrap-up reflections, please?
Yes, I think we are bad for time, but my parting shot for majority of the young people in attendance today, university students, is that to recognize your role as opinion leaders and trendsetters in your community. In the case of Uganda, we're a very young country, so much as you're young people, you have immense responsibility on your shoulders, because upwards of 50% of our population look up to you as their elders and future leaders. So there are certain things that you will need to appreciate and understand and interest yourself in, and I think the background of the Rwanda experience is very key. One of them is our approach to dealing with post-conflict societies. Again, for those of you who are students of sociology and political science or follow news, you know there's a prevalent prescription for post-conflict societies that sees the fighting, organize elections, then have a winner of those elections, the one who loses, respect the results of the election, no matter the circumstances in which those elections were had, and then let's revisit after 5 years. I think that's a very problematic way of dealing with some of these very complex issues. And in many ways, Rwanda could have ended there. And using the lessons from Rwanda's experience, it could inform perhaps our approach or the approach of our leaders in dealing with fairly similar situations today. I'll give you an example that President Yoweri Museveni mentions in his book, Sowing the Mustard Seed. This is just before the genocide in 1993. You know, there were prevalent accusations that Uganda was supporting the RPF and all that. So he says a European ambassador approached him and said, Mr. President, you need to talk to the RPF to stop fighting. Otherwise, and these are the words of the ambassador according to President Museveni, otherwise Habyarimana, or the government of Habyarimana, will deal with the 900,000 Tutsis in the country. I don't know if I've phrased it correctly or how he mentioned it. But remember, it's before the genocide, before the official figure or genocide count of 800,000. So meaning, members of the diplomatic community resident in Rwanda knew what the Rwandan government then was capable of doing. But instead of halting them in their steps, they used it as a blackmail tool against the president of a neighboring country who was trying to understand what was happening in this situation, and trying to talk to a peer and say, look, listen to this section of your population and deal with their concerns. In any case, even if the RPF cause or approach was the wrong one, why not deal with the politicians or the refugees in the RPF who have taken up arms? Why risk the lives of 900,000 citizens of your country whose only link to the RPF is ethnicity. I will not mention countries in this region, but you know similar conversations have come from the same quarters, blackmailing leaders in our region to speak to so and so otherwise. It's a very important message for young Africans today, because once you understand that, the conceit, the disregard, the disrespect of our own processes and our histories and our approach to complex situations, we will always be in this cycle of violence. That would be my parting shot and message to the young people.
Thank you very much. And those are really deep and meaningful considerations that we need to take away with us as the younger people, and not to forget, you know, the lessons from the past, but also how do we move forward, because we have to move forward from 30 years ago. I don't know whether we still have time. I don't see the, but we could have 1 or 2 questions. Can we have 2 questions? 2 comments or 2 questions, very precise, that you can address to any one of the panelists. Keep it brief. You're free to tell us your name, where you're from, and the question. Yes, gentlemen, I'll take that one, and then.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gashegu Muramira. I'm a journalist, bureau chief of Rwanda's New Times in Uganda, and the executive director of the Africa Integration Think Tank. It's a Pan-African organization that is starting to do conversations around issues of importance, like the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. It's just a comment. It won't be a question, and I'm addressing it to the African young people, like my brother Tawol has done. Can we learn to do collective condemnation on revisionists of genocide? Can we learn to do that as young people in Africa, as even countries, as governments? We've spoken about so many revisionists. We know French writers that have done revisionism work on the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. You've heard of people like Pierre Pien in France. But we have a most recent example, a tweet on X by a whole US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. You all saw that tweet on X, saying the genocide in Rwanda was for Tutsi, Hutu, Twa. That is unbelievable. That is in direct contravention of the 1948 Convention on Genocide. So I think we should learn as Africa. I'm looking at a day when we are going to say the genocide period in April should be cutting across all African countries.
All right.
Like having a day to all remember and condemn what these people are doing. I think that will solve the problem of denial and revisionism. Thank you.
Collective call, which also requires information and knowledge gathering, because you cannot call to action when people don't know. Yes, that gentleman, and I'm sorry, I won't be able to give the microphone to anyone else because we are really bad for time.
Thank you, the Rwandan ambassador to Uganda. One observation and a question. My brother Kagolo, there are Rwandans who are living in Uganda, and there are Banyarwanda who are citizens of Uganda. You are making a mistake. When you said Rwandans in Fotro, you are meaning they were refugees from Rwanda. There are Banyarwanda who are citizens of Uganda. My sister from Nairobi, it has been bothering me for many years. You are bashing Europeans, imperialists, but we are here having a conversation in English. In English. Swahili is spoken in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Tanzania, in Burundi. And we are having an international event at Makerere University, bashing Europeans who really facilitated this genocide in Rwanda. And we are discussing it in English.
Okay, thank you.
Trust me, I wish it was in Swahili or in Rwanda.
Thank you very much. And I'll give the lady just Yes, because I'm passionate and for inclusivity. The last question or comment.
I do appreciate the Rwanda High Commission and Makerere University for making this opportunity possible. And I appreciate highly every speaker, the Dr. Wandia from Kenya, Dr. Kikede, and all those people who spoke. It was very moving and very interesting. What I want to say as a student, I'm a Munyarwanda, Ugandan Munyarwanda, and I'm very old. They used to belong to the kingdom of Rwanda, rob, to kill, to destroy. The Tutsi, who were resident of Congo, but truly Congolese because they were put there by the laws and regulations of the Belgians, French, the English, and the Germans, and killed, and the nations are doing nothing. These people that place is not theirs because their forefathers from generation to generation were in that Congo part. So what I'm saying to all these speakers, kindly coin up a new way. All you speakers have spoken very well. Get together again and waken us up again and cause our young people, even from secondary school, to know these things so that never again these genocides are committed in our midst. Thank you very much.
Never again, never again. Thank you very much. Genocide is happening and we must heed the call of those that are affected. And we all are affected, by the way, because the ripple effect, it goes beyond the immediate community. No. I'm afraid we can't take any more questions. Would you like to, yes?
I think responding to her about what we can do going forward, and this is my request to the ambassador and to the Rwandan High Commission, is to cement this event and make it an annual event. The representative of the Vice Chancellor was here much earlier. I think this would be Uganda's contribution or Makerere's contribution to deepening this conversation by making this an annual conversation, have different speakers and presenters, and I think this is a more sustainable way to deal with the issues. Response to Mr. Gashumba, yes, it's contradictory that we're speaking in English, but I think what better way to send a clear message to the people you say are responsible than speak to them in the language they understand best. Thank you.
Thank you. In 1 minute, a reflection in 1 minute.
Just 1 minute. Thank you. I just wanted to start with that point, on our use of English. The fact that the colonialists came and gave us a lot of things, including the language and the knowledge about the world. It does not mean that we take wholly whatever they brought. We select. What is good for us, we take. What is not good for us, we leave it. And so our use of English, it's a medium of communication. They don't own it, by the way. United States speaks the same language. Canada speaks English. We speak English. The fact is that we all pick what is there for humanity to use and what we don't want. As Doctor said, you leave it. So I think it's only fair that the language we take. Number two, just the last one. I just wanted to comment on the element of, the Banyarwanda or the Kinyarwanda speakers in Eastern Congo. These are people over 11 million. The land they occupy, remember, is not, unlike other communities, for them, the land you occupy also bears your name. Banyamulenge are Banyamulenge because they live in the Murenge Hills. Banyaruchuro are Banyaruchuro because they live in Ruchuro. Banyamasisi are Banyamasisi because they live in a place called Masisi, and that's where they have always lived. So anybody telling them to go back to Rwanda, they're not going back. They've never been to Rwanda. Congo, they didn't go to Congo. Congo came to them.
Okay.
So that's what we have to realize.
All right.
And so really, that's why some of us, you know, vehemently believe that we need to make an effort just because there are people that are being victimized. Not that I have nothing to do with Congo. Go back to Zambia.
The message of human rights is clear.
Good.
We must observe the human rights of everybody
And-
to
and
live where they have a right to live.
Yes. Yes. And
And
I
no
wanted
genocide.
to also say that I'm so glad to have this opportunity. I was in this hall was not yet built. I was in this university 48 years ago. I left on the 9th of October, Independence Day is...
1962, 9th October.
Yeah, 9th October, 1976. That's the last time I was here, and I'm glad to be back.
Welcome
Thank you.
home. Welcome home. You don't know, so do the research, be living present. As we wrap up, I'd like to emphasize that we as Makerere University appreciate this conversation as a means for transforming society towards a more peaceful society, preventing genocide and countering the narrative of genocide. Thank you very much to this panel. Can you please give them a round of applause? They have done tremendously well, and at this point I'd like to hand over to the MC, Awel, to manage the rest of the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Zahra Nampeo, for such a spirited conversation. So much information, so much knowledge that a lot of us have to go back and reflect on. And once again, Professor Wandia, thank you so much for such a refreshed way of looking at these very complex issues. I'm personally going to pay particular attention to a lot of things that you've referred to, and also share your keynotes with a wider community at Makerere. And thank you, Ambassador Chabana, once again, for asking us to convene this very important event, and also for trusting me that I can manage this event. So I was mindful of time. And thank you all to the audience, really. You guys have been very patient. And it's on this note I wanted to just acknowledge, I was asking earlier who actually is in the audience, and they mentioned to me that there were students from Kampala International University, Makerere University, of course, Chambogo University, Bugema University, Kampala University, St. Lawrence University, Nkumba, Uganda Martyrs University, Ndeje, and Metropolitan. So such a fantastic audience which has been gathered here across different universities, and we really appreciate the patience and all the excellencies and distinguished guests who came and also made the time to attend this lecture. And of course to our guest of honor, Ambassador Chekire, for making time and being patient till the end. So thanks everybody, thanks for the great conversations to everybody on the panel. And it's at this point that I will ask, okay, photography and then the anthems. Okay, the program is guiding. So Ambassador Butawana and the guests, if you could come here, we want to just do a quick photo we'll request that you keep seated. We'd like to have a picture with a panel, and some of the guests who are still here. Isa, if you could help guide, and some of the guests, please, if you could. No. Right. So as we prepare, I'm going to ask the performing arts, student from performing arts, if you could come here, get ready for the anthems. Thank you very much. You may take your seats. And guys. All right. So okay. So if you guys can take us through the anthems, please.
Rwanda dukunda duhagurukiye kurangira ng'amahoro asabe mu bagutuye wishire wizane muri byose urangwe n'ishakutera imbere uhamye umubano n'amahanga yose maze ijambo ryawe riguhisha Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuwajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu. Oh, Uganda, may God uphold thee. We lay our future in thy hand. United, free for liberty, together we'll always stand.
You know how much? Yes, sure. Give it that way.
Prospero un po'. Ndabona ugezeho ekituufu ddamu kuliko mu dakika 10 zuka awo gamba otya siriya nnyo nizo bakera running with who? Rio.